Hello everyone, welcome to Room and Board. My name is Chris George, and today, love is in the air. I discard my cold exterior one day a year and give in to love, and that day is, of course, today. February 11th. No, it's not Valentine's Day, it is the day Love is Blind Season 2 premieres on Netflix. And so, in the spirit of that love, the purest love of them all, love in the pods, you know that everyone out there is probably going to be making a list, a top whatever list for first date games. Or as Jeff Probst might say, you're playing for love. But I'm here to break the mold. As you've probably already seen by the title of this video, contrary to popular belief, I don't think playing a game on a first date is a good idea. It's not. It is not a prime activity for the first date. It just isn't. Now, okay, fine. Maybe it is. Maybe you've known this person for a while and maybe it's just an excuse to hang out in case something happens. Fine, you two are the perfect couple. Would you get together already? Stop singing duets with each other and just confess your feelings. We can all see it. You're even singing A Tale as Old as Time. How much more evidence do you need? But other than that, if you're going in somewhat blind, just like Giannina Milady Gibelli, long may she reign, just take that first date and get to know each other first. I mean, you can play games on this list on your first date. You can play board games on your first date, sure. Even though I'm on the internet and I'm telling you what to do and therefore you legally have to listen to me. But I think for a lot of the hardcore gamers out there, which I know a lot of you watching are, before you know if the person you're seeing wishes to be indoctrinated into your addiction, and let's be real, they probably should or else they're not good enough for you, you should use your first date as a vehicle for that, to get to know them. And then if they want to see you again, which honestly is something I've never had any experience firsthand, so this list is hypothetical, what I wish we were playing on that second date that never came, then you can play the game. But at least have a baseline knowledge of knowing literally anything about that person. But once you've known each other, once you've asked each other the icebreakers, once you know his favorite color and where he grew up, or you've told her that her eyes are green, but they have that little bit of red tint, some brown in them, then you can suggest your game day or night. And realistically, I'm sure it'll probably come up in your first date that you really enjoy playing games, and what a perfect segue into the second date. But before we get into this list, this intro is going to continue to be a bit longer. There are some rules because yes, Chris George, Love Doctor, MD, doesn't deal in feelings. We deal in stone cold facts. The goal of this list and the goal of these games, at least from my approach, is to not play the game. It's still to get to know each other. These are games that hopefully allow conversation to happen. The game is secondary. And keep that in the forefront of your mind when you're playing these games. The game is, in fact, secondary. Flirting is the first, the primary. Or conversation is the primary. Because again, this list doesn't necessarily have to apply to a date. It could just be a friend catch-up. You haven't seen this person in a long time. You want to reconnect with them at whatever level. I mean, but in that case, the existing relationship that is there would probably provide a bit more of a baseline. I think the pool for that specific situation is a little bit wider, but it doesn't matter because the goal is connection and conversation. And the game is just there so that you don't have to look at each other and that it can fill those awkward pauses. Now, there will be some co-ops on this list as well. And if you are playing a co-op, even if it's not on this list, you're deciding to play a cooperative game because you feel like, hey, we can work together. I have some thoughts on that, which I'll touch on in a bit. But my feeling with these is always play on either the easy or the normal mode. Don't push it right away to the expert level. Often in these cases, you are potentially indoctrinating someone into the hobby and therefore make the stakes low. You shouldn't set it at a level where it takes more precedence than the conversation, at least for our goals for this particular list. And like anything, these rules can obviously be broken. You know your person a lot better than I do, except for one of you. You know who you are. So do what you want. But as I've said 100 times already, remember the game is secondary. I know, I'm as surprised as you are. Even just saying so puts a bad taste in my mouth. But it is secondary. Your goals are different than a normal game night, which is to bring utter devastation to your opponents and send them home crying. You may actually want to see this person again. Maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe it's enough they paid for your admission to the board game cafe and Joke's on them. Time to find another sucker for the next night. So there you go. Those are my rules. Those are my considerations when making this list. And by all means, if you agree or disagree, please put it in the comments below. There are a plethora of games out there, and we only have a certain amount of time to touch upon some of them. So definitely write into the comments if you've had any success. For those of you who are stumbling upon this video and are watching it and are going on that second date or whatnot, check those out in the comments as well. But first off, here are some games that you will not find on this list and that you may find on other people's lists, and I'm here to tell you that they're trash ideas. And if this feels like a personal attack, well, you know what? It probably is. Number 1, Lost Cities. It's boring. It will not play very well with someone who's not interested in the hobby. I mean, I like Lost Cities. I like math, but this is not a date game for the general populace. It might be, but you know, all of this stuff, all of these large statements, it obviously applies to the vast minority. Remember, rule number 4, whatever it is, all of these can be broken. That's the last time I'm going to say it. Now back to absolutes, which only the Sith deal in. Lost Cities is not a date game. Oh yeah, and now you add everything up and multiply it by 4 and subtract 80 points. Want a smooch? Nobody does. Patchwork is another one you won't find on this list because that one is really hit or miss. Every time I've pulled it out and thought it was a good idea and thought the other person might enjoy it, and we choose it over a number of these that I've put on the list, it is never as successful as I want it to be. It's okay. It's an okay game, but it's a better cottage game. A game that you play when you're tired and you don't really want to talk. I don't think it promotes conversation. Another one not on this list is Fog of Love, because yes, you definitely want to roleplay as a married couple on your second date. No, you don't. So those few caveats aside, and the list is coming, I swear. I also have a couple honorable mentions that didn't make it onto the top 10, and therefore I now have to highlight as honorable mentions, or else I'm a liar in the title of this video and YouTube will cancel me. So one of these honorable mentions is a game called Takenoko. It is a game, a really cute game, very kawaii, where you're slowly building out terrain and you have this little panda, and you can get points for having the panda eat bamboo, or you can get points for irrigating the garden or the terrain in a different way. It's really cute, it's really fun, and I wanted to put this on this list, but it eventually got cut because I think this sort of cute theme is very appealing to people. It's lightweight enough, but it has a decent depth of strategy that you can really get into it. But it's only an honorable mention because I've only played it a couple times and I don't own it, so I don't feel as comfortable with the ins and out of it, but I think that would be probably a fun one. Another one is Hanamakoji, which I've never played and do not own, but I've heard really good things about and I think would meet the criteria of this list as well. But they're honorable mentions because I don't have enough personal experience with them in terms of being able to anticipate how the evening could play out. And then the third honorable mention, of course, is Devilish Dice. Devilish Dice! Which feels more like a third date kind of game, if you know what I mean. Okay, so let's get into the list, the top 10 games. Enough of that. You've probably skipped to here. This is the beginning of the list. Number 10, we have Forbidden Island. And I'm really hesitant about putting this on this list, and I'm really hesitant about co-ops in general as a first or second date game. This can be tricky. Often co-ops are a little bit more involved. They require a lot of group thinking, and I find with people who may not match your enthusiasm for board games, and that's the sort of baseline at which this list is set. Co-ops can be somewhat intimidating, and they also open the door for quarterbacking, or what's known as the alpha gamer, which if you're an insufferable alpha gamer, maybe this is the perfect game to play on a date, because then they'll know never to come back again. But Forbidden Island is a game that is pandemic-light. It's the lighter version of Pandemic. You're on this island, you have to collect these 4 relics together before the island sinks into the sea, and then you have to make it to the helipad and get the heck off there. It's light, it's decently fun. It's a game that I don't particularly enjoy that much because I like co-ops that are punishing. I like really hard co-ops, and I find with Forbidden Island, I'm never as challenged as I might like to be, but that is good for this first date because it provides a lighter puzzle with that smaller time frame that you can work on together without it being necessarily too overwhelming of an experience. So that's why it eventually made it on this list. Regardless of my personal preference towards it, I think it is a nice little puzzle that you can work on together and still provides enough room for conversation. If you are playing this, I would recommend setting the water level at almost the easiest level or the normal level. Don't push it. Keep it light. That way you can keep the conversation flowing and the focus where it should be, which is on each other. Now, number 9 is the highest weight on this list, so to speak, with the largest complexity, and that is the game Everdell. And this is a game all about creating your own little tableau. Oh, that would have been embarrassing if it wasn't the correct orientation. I passed the test. This is a game about creating your own little tableau, this city filled with forest creatures. And it's just visually appealing and really satisfying to build up your tableau. Now, this is also a caveat. If you've played a lot of Everdell and the person you're with hasn't played a lot of games, this may not be that great a choice because it can be pretty punishing. You can really get it out of control, and it also is probably the most complicated on the list, so this requires someone to be really invested in the game playing experience. It kind of breaks a lot of rules that I was talking about, but I have this on this list at this lower bar because I think the theme attracts a lot of people. It's a relaxing, satisfying experience, and as long as you don't demolish your opponent, it might be a really good introduction to the hobby. It's also here because I love it. I love heavier games. I'd love to play this on a date. You kidding me? You ask me to a date, you pull out Everdell, we play this? Maggie will be sleeping alone that night. That's all I have to say. Now, game number 8 is a game that is lauded as being perfect for 2 players. That is Santorini. I love this game. It's an abstract strategy sort of game where you're trying to get one of your people to the top of a tower. That's it. And on your turn, you can move your person and build chunks of tower. And you're trying to box out your opponent so that they can't do anything. But the reason I think it's so good is because games take 15 minutes, 20 minutes. They are satisfying enough strategically that you feel like you've played a game. They're very tactile. So if you're playing this at a board game cafe, you have these fun pieces around. You're constantly building this up. It creates a lovely table presence out of nothing. Each round you play, you can switch up your different powers, and it's easy enough to pick up that you can teach it no problem, people can grasp it no problem, and you can play round after round after round. Or you can stop in the middle of the move and just talk and chat and go right back to it, and the board state hasn't shifted. It doesn't require additional focus. It can be as involved as you want. I think it's a really solid game. It's a wonderful 2-player game. It only should be played at 2 players, but I am a big fan of this one, so I had to include it on this list. It's great. Santorini, number 8. Now, number 7, I have 2, but they're kind of the same, and they scratch the same itch. And these are Hanabi or And Then We Held Hands. Both of these are all about limited communication and communicating with your minds and deduction in a sense. I like Hanabi a lot better than I like And Then We Held Hands. In Hanabi, you're trying to create a firework display. You're just counting upwards from 1 to 5, playing cards down. But the thing is, you can't see your own cards. You can see your partner's cards. So you can give a clue saying this is a number or this is a color, and you really get that sense of working together. Now, this one isn't great for conversation because you're not allowed to communicate. Well, to communicate about the game while you're playing, the only information you're allowed to give are the clues that you're hinting. But this is a perfect game if you just want to stare into the other person's eyes and hope that they understand what you're trying to communicate. And if you do get that unspoken communication, it'll feel really, really good. And Then We Held Hands is a similar sort of game. You're trying to end up in the middle of this board at the same time, and you're playing cards to shift around on the board. So if you like that unspoken communication, this is all about honoring the other person's feelings, literally, in the game. And at the end of the game, you're playing out a fight, basically, and you're hoping to resolve the fight by the end so that you can hold hands. Honestly, it's just in here so that once you finish the game, you can hold hands. It's the name of the game. How can you not? Now, number 6 is specifically if you're at a board game cafe. Sure, maybe second date, they're not at your house. Maybe you've gone to a neutral location as well. Also another reason why the second date should happen, because you have the potential to be at each other's homes and enjoy a glass of wine and just have a nice evening with each other. But this is if you are out at a board game cafe. What better way to take advantage of the space and of the expensive things that they have with crokinole or any sort of larger dexterity game. Crokinole should capture the feeling of air hockey in a sense. You've gone out to a movie and there's an air hockey table and you just flick some discs at each other. It's fun, it's tactile, it's perfect for eating and conversation. There is no strategy other than how well you can flick things, and it is great for promoting that conversation while having something to do with your hands. Any of these larger wooden games would probably work. Bamboleo or Hamster Rolly, they capture the feeling of that Jenga, but better. Nobody wants to play Jenga on a second date. Hey, you want to come over and play some Jenga? No, but it's something that you pull out just to have something to do with your hands. And that's why I think this sort of dexterity, tactile genre is a really solid choice for just something to do while hanging out. That really should be the title of this video, but it's much less interesting. 10 things to do while you're just hanging out. 10 board games and chill? That would be pretty good. Maybe that's a different list. I'm not sure. On to number 5, which is this little card game called Jaipur. But I'm going to cheat again and say it doesn't have to be Jaipur. It can be any 2-player card game you want. Now, Jaipur specifically is you're playing cards back and forth. You're trying to collect sets and play them in front of you, and you score points. If you play a set sooner, you score more points. Who cares? When I was talking about this list with a variety of people, I was trying to get their opinion and saying, hey, if you were on a first or second date, what board game would you enjoy playing? A lot of people responded with, honestly, just a simple card game. And I think the reason for that is twofold. One, you don't have to learn any new rules, which I think is very significant and important. People know cards, people are familiar with card games, and with that familiarity comes number 2, it's just easy. It's easy to pull out, it's easy to shuffle and deal, and it's not that large of a commitment, and it's not as scary as pulling out a giant campaign of Gloomhaven and then saying, we're starting this is going to take us from dates 2 till we're married. Jaipur, for me, isn't the greatest game of all time, but it provides that ease of play. You shuffle the cards, you stack the tokens, you go back and forth. You could play cribbage, you could play gin, or you could even play spit, the speed game of trying to stack the cards really quickly. And then, if you slap the card and the other person slaps the card right after, well, we're getting back to number 7, and then we held hands. What I should have mentioned in dexterity, and is kind of applicable right now, is that any chance for your hands to touch inside the bag of popcorn, to replicate that sort of feeling, that's what you want to aim for. So spit might be a great one for that. But there's a sense of calmness and casualness that happens when you're playing cards. You can have a hand. Cards are perfect for conversation, and Jaipur is a card game, which makes it that. So Jaipur is kind of my filler for this category, but think about those card games. Any of them I feel will fit the bill. That's number 5. Number 4 is not Codenames, Codenames Duet, specifically the 2-player version of Codenames. And there's a reason that Codenames is such a popular game. There's a reason why it's had so many iterations of different types of Codenames that people keep on buying. It's because the core of the game is not Codenames. The core of the game is communication and unspoken communication. And it's actually through something like Codenames or Codenames Duet where you're working together to try and connect and give each other clues, very similar to Hanabi or And Then We Held Hands. You're trying to create this unspoken common language. And so with Codenames, you actually might find that you'll learn something about the other person, which is absolutely what you want to be doing at this point in the date. My friend Laura is dating an Irishman, and they were playing Codenames, and Trunk was on the board, and he said car 3 or something, and Trunk happened to be the assassin, but he'd never called it a trunk, he called it a boot. so we never made that association. And so these sorts of ways of thinking, or I never thought of it that way, might provide that impotence for, not impotence, that's a different thing. Hopefully there's none of that. But if there is, there are other things you can, no, let's find the right word. Impulse, start for a manner of conversation. So that's why Codenames Duet, I think, is a really good choice, and that's number 4. Now, number 3 is Carcasonne. And before you skip away, say, okay, what's number 2? Carcasonne, I've played that many a times. I think there really is a case to be made for Carcasonne, because Carcasonne is one of those games, perhaps you've never heard of it, but more likely you have. It's been around for a while, and it is regarded as a really good gateway game, a really common game that people learn about when they're first investigating the hobby. It was for me, for sure. This was probably my 4th or 5th game when I was starting to get into the board gaming hobby. And so I was hesitant to put it on this list because, I want to be original, I want to be fresh and new. But I think there is a case to return to Carcasonne because A, the person you're playing with may never have played it, and B, this kind of hits the same as if you were just to hang out and do a puzzle. It's a tile-laying game where you create a whole city at the end, and sure, it's competitive and you're fighting for roads and cities and who can complete them the best, and whoever gets the fields in a 2-player game basically wins. But if you ignore that and you think about the journey of playing Carcasonne, it's simple and it provides an awesome vehicle for conversation. Because what are you doing? You're picking up a tile and you're saying, okay, where should I put it in this picture? And where should I put it creating this picture together? There's nothing really to belabor too heavily, unless of course you're thinking about the farms non-stop from the very beginning, in which case don't play Carcasonne. But I think it really provides a nice vehicle for conversation and it's a very inviting game to play with people. I think this is one of those games that regardless of the score at the end, you will both be able to feel a bit accomplished of having created this larger thing and hopefully created an even larger thing between the two of you. I'm talking about your relationship, not the, no, you get it. But I know you'll probably find Carcasonne on a lot of lists. You'll probably find a lot of these games on a lot of lists. But I really think this is a good choice. And at one point when I was making this list, it was the number 1 game, because of the room it provides for conversation and the satisfaction that you get when the game is fully completed. So that's number 3. Now, number 2 on a second date is an unlock game or an escape room game. The exit games also work for this, although I personally prefer unlock, having played a bunch of both. You could also play something like Chronicles of Crime or Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, depending upon the excitement and interest of your particular party. But just like going out to an escape room would be a fantastic date, doing an escape room in a box is equally as interesting. And I think this experience is significantly better than any other co-op game that you could do, because you're doing more than just solving a puzzle. You're going on a journey. You're unveiling a story. You're figuring out where it takes you. Now this one, there's a clock. There's a ticking clock. There is no room for additional conversation and getting to know each other, but this will be the centerpiece of the evening, so to speak. If you're gonna hang out, talk, you do this escape room, and then you revel in the thrill of completing this 1-star easiest unlock that exists. And you can talk about it afterwards. You can say, oh, that was fun, let's do another one tomorrow night, or whenever you get together again. For my 30th birthday a while back, we got a whole bunch of people together. I said, my dream, always my dream, is to have a bunch of people playing games at multiple tables that I am not involved in. Because I like that. I love games. I love people playing games. I love people playing games with each other. And so we had a bunch of unlocked games in various rooms that people could go in, almost like their own little escape room, and groups could go in and play through the unlock and see if they completed it or not in the hour or whatever, to make sure everyone was constantly entertained at the party. And I just think the experience of doing these escape rooms together is awesome. It's super fun. It gives you something to talk about. It almost acts as the movie portion of a dinner and a movie. It gives you something to talk about after the date is done, or after that portion of the date is done, and then you can get back to hanging out with each other. It provides a set piece for the evening. And so if you are more inclined that way, or your date is more inclined to do it that way, then I think Unlock or Exit or any of them are the way to go. And finally, my number one game for a second date is a game that I adore. I have played many, many, many times. It's a classic, and it's Splendor. Now you might be turning your nose up at this game. Splendor has been killed numerous times by numerous other games. Century Golem is one that comes immediately to mind because it's a very similar mechanic. But what I love about Splendor is the time, the intensity, and the puzzle. I just played this again the other day. Quick round, took us 25 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. The games will be fairly tight. You're slowly building an engine, you're buying cards, which all have point values associated with them, and it's first person to get to 15 points wins. But every time you buy a card, that card will act as an additional resource, an additional gem that can be used to purchase better and bigger cards. And this is a game when my girlfriend and I were first dating, we went to a board game cafe, we pulled it out, we played it once. I think it was the first time either of us had played it. And we thought, yeah, that was so much fun. Let's do it again and again and again. And we played it like, I don't know, 5 or 6 times that afternoon. And we had intended to play other games, but we just kept on saying, no, let's just play another round. And for me, this game strikes the perfect balance. I like things that are challenging, that are mentally challenging. I know I've been going on about how the game doesn't matter, but of course it matters in a sense, right? It has to matter somewhat, or else why bother doing it? And for me, this can matter, and it can be close and tight, and then it's done. And you can play it again, or you cannot. Honestly, it has a similar cycle to it as Santorini, but I just feel like there is something so satisfying about playing Splendor that I really could play it over and over again. And I think 2 players is the optimal player count, because you have that back and forth. And it never gets too mean or too strategic. There are moments where you can reserve a card out from under somebody and deny them the points that they were building up to. But it's never going to cross the threshold of being incredibly antagonistic, like something like Unfair might, where you just destroy everything that the person has been working towards for 2 hours. It doesn't overstay its welcome. And it gives that sort of efficiency puzzle. The gems are fantastic to play with. It has that tactile feel to it as well. Although I know some other versions don't have the weighted chips as much as the first edition versions did, I still think it is a fantastic game. From my own personal experience, I've had pretty great success with it. And so if you are new to the hobby or your playing partner is new to the hobby, I can only speak from my own personal experience, but I can viscerally remember playing this over and over again at a board game cafe with my girlfriend, and it's a great memory. So that's why I had to put this as number 1. But like anything, people are different. People have different tastes. Splendor may not be your number 1. I feel like there is a lot of validity to all of them on this list. And please let me know in the comments if you don't think that these are good choices and why, and if you've had negative experiences with them, because I think that also is valuable to anyone who might be searching these sorts of games out or using this list as inspiration. Because that's all it's meant to be, inspiration. Number 0 is, of course, whatever the other person seems interested in. This is number 0. This is the most important thing to do. If the person you're with wants to play Twilight Struggle, marry them and do it. If the person you're with wants to play Scrabble, if the person you're no longer with keeps walking through your frame, she'll be on the curb. Scrabble's actually a great choice. Somewhat. I think it requires a little bit too much thought on the dictionary, and the difference of jumble capabilities has a tendency to maybe make it not fun for one party or the other. But if there is something that the person you're with has expressed interest in, just do that. I know that's a simple answer, but it really is that simple. Anyway, I hope this list has given you something to think about. Maybe these are games worth looking into. Maybe you'll find that you're not interested in them and you're going to go into a different route. So if you found something else that is successful, again, make sure to include it in the comments below. But I hope this list has given you some inspiration for activities to do and ways to involve your future partner in the hobby that we all love so much. My name is Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase, but have a wonderful commercialization of love day upcoming. And hey, hopefully you get to play a game out of it. And if you need to, remember, you can always send your prospective partner some of these awesome Survivor Valentines. I'll see you in the next one.